5 years ago, I started using the Fuji GFX 50s medium format camera for most of my still photography. After 5 years, was it worth the price? And maybe even more importantly, is this still a good camera to use in 2022? My name's Marshall, welcome to the channel, and stick with me to find out. Alright, let's just start talking about that camera. So the Fuji GFX 50s is a medium format camera, and what that means is the sensor is larger than a full frame or APS-C sensor. This is the main difference by going medium format, and I'm not going to hit on all the specs of this camera because that is all over the internet and that would take a ton of time, but just understand that Fuji has a reputation of having amazing colors. It has the larger sensor, and this gives those images a distinctive look. The build quality of this camera is outstanding. Now let's talk about the competition in this space. There's a fair amount of medium format digital cameras that competes directly with the Fuji. One of them is the Hasselblad X and the other being the Pentax. These two camera systems are really amazing systems as well, but based on cost, the lens lineup, reliability, and Fuji's famous color profiles, going back to their film days, I really chose the Fuji and never second guessed that choice. I've had numerous jobs where I've used the Fuji over the last 5 years, and the GFX 50s has never let me down one time. It is a super reliable and dependable camera. Now let's talk about the image quality. Let's just say the Fuji really shines when it comes to image quality. Fuji is very well known for their colors, and this system is right on par with that. The colors in this are amazing. The big 50 megapixel files are great to work with when I'm editing, and as you can see here, with the sunset, when you look at the rocks in the foreground, there is just a ton of detail. And also with this portrait, you can see how crisp and clean the eye is and all the detail. And just to note, this portrait was taken with a lens that is almost 50 years old. So this camera is amazing, and the image quality that it produces is outstanding. With most things, the Fuji is not perfect. There are a few areas that I tend to dislike about this camera, and one is the size. Medium format is just really large to carry around outside the studio, and even more than that is it draws a lot of attention because you're carrying around something so big. So if you're trying to be stealthy and say do street photography, this might not be a great camera for you. Now, if you're all using it on a tripod or you're in the studio all the time, that's a totally different ballgame. And that brings me to my second dislike. Because this camera is so big and doesn't have image stabilization, when you start slowing down the shutter speed, you really should be on a tripod to get the full breadth of the detail out of the GFX 50s and those big files. So if you don't mind carrying a tripod around all the time, it's not a bad thing. But just remember that that will probably be the case to get that full resolution. If you need image stabilization, the version 2 of this camera actually has image stabilization in the camera, and so that might actually be a better option for you. But with that said, those are the only things that I can really come up with that I dislike about this camera. Was this camera worth the price 5 years ago, and is it worth the price today in 2022? So I've used this camera for 5 years. I've used it on numerous jobs, and I have taken a lot of fine art photography with it. So for me, this camera was totally worth the price to get 5 years worth of use out of it. As a matter of fact, I really think that I'll get another 5 years out of it. It has totally held up that well. Now, I would also say that if you are just buying this today, in 2022, I could only find it used because it's no longer being sold new for around $2,500. Well, that's a lot of money compared to the Fuji GFX 50s, which is only about $1,500 more. If you have the budget, I would totally take a look at the version 2 because of the image stabilization. But if you are on a budget, this still camera at $2,500 used and take $1,500 for a lens is totally worth it and will produce some amazing images. Like I said, I've used it for 5 years and it's always produced for me. So to me, there's no question of whether it was worth it or whether it is worth it today to buy it. This is still a great stills photography camera. The Fuji GFX 50s has been a great camera for me. It has just continued taking images for the last 5 years, and I hope that it continues to take more for the next 5 years. So thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I really hope that I was able to give you some information and help you with your photography journey and tell you a little bit about the Fuji GFX 50s and my experience with it. If you like this content, don't forget to hit the thumbs up below. And if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. This is how I know to keep doing these and making these videos. And I want to hear from you. Do you have questions about the Fuji GFX 50s? Or do you have experience with this camera? What lenses have you used with it? And what was your experience with the files? Leave some comments below. I want to hear from you. And until next time, enjoy your photography journey.